Okay, so today for our read aloud, we're going to be reading I Am Neil Armstrong by Brad Meltzer. So this is the same author who wrote the book we just read about, Jane Goodall. And I just love these books because they give us information and true stories about some really famous people in history. So let's learn all about Neil Armstrong. And here he is. Maybe that gives you a clue as to what he did. I am Neil Armstrong. I grew up on a farm with no electricity. When I was 8 years old, my goal was to climb this silver maple tree, the biggest one in my backyard. It seemed impossible. The tree was so big and I was so small. How would I do it? And there he is looking at that big tree. I need to be brave. I wasn't a brave kid though. Back in Ohio, when I was 3 years old, I got scared when we went to see Santa Claus. Say cheese. And there he is looking so scared. I'd also need to be smart. As a kid, I loved to read. In first grade, I read more than 100 books. Really? Yep, more than 100 in 1 year. There he is talking to another kid. Finally, I need to be patient. Remember that word patient? It means that you are willing to wait. During Monopoly games, when my brother would get upset and kick the table, I always stayed calm. Yet, to climb that huge tree, the only way to get to the top was this. I had to take that first step. Up we go. Climbing the tree was like a puzzle. I needed to pick the right branches in the right order. I had to engineer or figure out a solution. And there he is starting his climb. I had to use my brain even more than my body. And there he is. Plus, I loved the feeling of being so high up. There he is again. But then I grabbed a dead branch and crack. I fell 15 feet. I landed flat on my back. Luckily, I wasn't hurt. On that day, I did learn not to grab dead branches. But the most important thing I did... And there's his sister asking, should I get Mom? Yeah. So the most important thing I did was get back up again. Success never comes easy. It takes hard work. And when it came to hard work, I was really good at that. At 10 years old, I mowed grass at a cemetery for 10 cents an hour. And there he is, hard at work. Those jobs helped pay for the one thing I loved more than anything else. Then I worked at a bakery. I was so small I could fit into the mixing vats to clean them. There he is cleaning. Airplanes. My mom bought me my first toy plane when I was 2 or 3 years old. After that, I was always zooming around the house and through the neighborhood. And there he is, vroom. That kid really likes planes, doesn't he? When I was 6, I took my first real airplane ride in an aluminum high-wing monoplane called the Tin Goose. The 12 seats inside were all wicker chairs. It rattled like crazy. This guy's saying, "This is not a good idea." My dad was scared. I enjoyed it. I became obsessed with learning about planes, reading about them, and even building them. As a kid, I built so many model airplanes, they covered my entire bedroom and part of the basement. By the time I was 15, instead of buying toy airplanes, I started saving my money for flying lessons. I worked 3 jobs, making 40 cents an hour. It took me over 22 hours to pay for a single lesson. Let's go on another flight. You really like planes, don't you? What gave you that idea? And by 16, I got my real pilot's license, even before I got my driver's license. As a teenager, I loved flying so much. I'd have the same dream over and over. In that dream, by holding my breath, I could hover over the ground. I didn't fly or really move. I'd just float there. When I got older, I joined the Navy, flying in 78 missions during the Korean War. On one of them, my plane lost its wing, so I needed to eject and get out immediately. I'd never taken ejection training, so even though my plane was about to crash, I had to stay calm and read the directions written on the seat. Let's see, how to open the parachute. Wow, he must have been so brave. I landed safely in the water. By the end of the war, the U.S. gave me many war medals, though I never bragged about them. I'd been taught to stay humble. In college, I studied how to be an engineer, which is a person who designs and builds machines and structures. That love of engineering led me to become a test pilot. At Edwards Air Force Base, we'd test the newest planes, like this X-15 rocket plane, which went up to 4,520 miles per hour, otherwise known as a Mach 6. That's still the fastest anyone has ever moved in a manned-powered aircraft. And there he is in that plane. Engineers test and learn, test and learn. By flying that rocket, we learn new things about aerodynamics, which is how air affects planes, hypersonic speed, and the best materials to use on airplanes. Making things better, that's engineering. In 1956, the space race had begun. Both America and the Soviet Union were competing to be the first into outer space. The Soviets sent the first satellite into space. It was named Sputnik. Then they sent their first living creatures that survived space travel. 2 dogs named Strelka and Belka. Woof! Translation, we got back safely. And there they are in the rocket or satellite. The Soviet Union also sent the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space. Though we sent a person named Alan Shepard soon after. And there's those guys. America wanted to catch up, so President John F. Kennedy issued a challenge that year. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon. A man on the moon? Can you imagine? Not even the Soviets had traveled that far. So how would we manage to climb that high? The only thing we knew for sure was this. We'd have to engineer a solution. We needed new ideas, new equipment, and to fly all the way to the moon, we needed a new type of pilot, an astronaut. And here he is. From all across the country, people, including me, applied to be astronauts for NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. To check if we could handle space, NASA put us through lots of wild tests. Here, they shot ice water into my ear to see how I'd react to the cold. And there he is getting ice water. In another test, they put me in a black room, no lights, no clocks, and told me to come out after 2 hours. They were testing if we could judge time without tools. I sang this song over and over. 15 men in a boarding house bed, roll over, roll over. Since I knew how long the song was, I used it to mark the time. Very smart. They even put me in a really hot room where it got up to 145 degrees Fahrenheit. To keep my body heat normal, I did nothing but sit still. I tried to not even think. And of course, they spun me around and around. This is centrifuge training. It lets you feel the speed of re-entering Earth's atmosphere. As you approach 15 Gs, meaning the force of your speed pushes against you with 15 times your own weight, your eyeballs flatten and you can't see. He's passing every test. To get to the moon, NASA had a step-by-step plan. The Mercury missions would take Americans into space, and the Gemini missions would take us into orbit around the Earth. With each step, we would get a little farther and go a little higher. On March 16th of 1966, I was ready for my first space flight on the Gemini 8. The goal was to fly alongside and dock with other spacecrafts so we were both linked together. Look at the Earth from up here. I wonder if I can see my house in Houston. It was the first time 2 spacecrafts ever connected in space. Everyone started celebrating the moment we were docked. And then suddenly, we were undocked again and spinning out of control. Something's wrong. What's happening, Gemini? Are you okay? So it looks like they came apart here. After all those years as a test pilot, I knew how to stay calm. I kept my eyes on the controls so I could fire another thruster to stop our spin. The mission had to be stopped earlier than planned. We landed safely, but it taught me another lesson. We're tumbling end over end. There's a short circuit in one of our thrusters. If we can't stop spinning, the force will tear the ship apart. And there they are upside down. And the other man in there with him was named Dave Scott. Nothing in space is easy. Over and over, there were setbacks and devastating crashes. During a practice session on the launch pad, astronauts Gus Grisman, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee were killed when a frayed wire caused an accidental fire. Over in the Soviet Union, cosmonauts, the Russian term for astronauts, died too. At times, going to the moon seemed impossible. But we never let it stop us. With each setback, we learned how to strengthen the Apollo spacecraft, which would take us to the moon. Apollo 8 just made the first orbit of the moon. There it is. When Apollo 11 was finally ready, I said to the flight director, "Please tell everyone who worked on this that this is their launch. Tell them they'll be riding with us all the way." All that was left now was to proceed with the steps in the plane. And it says, whenever I talked about flying an aircraft or spacecraft, I used the term we. That's because every accomplishment any of us achieved required the help of so many others. From scientists and engineers to welders and mathematicians, to tailors who sewed the spacesuits, to all the astronauts from the previous missions. Catherine, would you check these numbers? All right, so we're going to stop right there. We are halfway through the book, so I want you guys to think about what you think is going to happen next and make some predictions, and I'll post the rest of this tomorrow. Bye.